Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a build request. This is actually a build that was kind of suggested over on my Discord by, I believe their name is pronounced Faye over on the Discord, so big shout out to Faye, as well as Frost over on the Discord for kind of confirming a few things for me. Between the three of us together, we were able to come up with this build. Now, the original goal of the build was to get the most use out of the Displacer Beast shape Illithid Power as possible. And while that form is pretty powerful on its own, I'll have a link in the description to the wiki page where you can see all of its abilities, but it comes with things like, 2 extra attacks, the ability to teleport, deal psychic damage, create those illusory clones that can also attack. It's got a lot going for it, but there is a way to make it even more powerful, which I'll get into in a minute. But then of course that came with the question, how do we make a character like that interesting? Because the problem is, yes, you're going to be wholly reliant on a form that is only able to be used once per long rest, and you only get it in Act 3. So we had to come up with an idea for the character that would make sense leveling up through the game, and as such we came up with a Corrupted Druid, kind of similar to the Shadow Druids that exist already in-game, if you know about them, but I decided that their kind of lore didn't exactly match up to what I had in my head for this character. But what I believe this character is somebody who is a druid, obviously, and can wild shape and all that, but has kind of taken a different approach. They believe that nature works in very strange ways, and aberrations, undead, monsters and fiends are all as natural as birds, bears and all those other things, and as such he is taken to using wild shape forms, such as the Displacer Beast form, that most druids would consider completely abhorrent and goes against what they would consider to be the natural order. And so this guy is out here summoning undead, doing all sorts of different things that maybe other druids would kind of be like, yeah, not so much. So I would say this guy is kind of an evil character, but not really. I would definitely say a morally grey character. I don't think he outright commits evil, but, obviously deliberately leaning into the Illithid Powers and messing around with people's corpses by summoning the undead is a bit questionable. So I feel like this character has a lot of complexity to them. Also, I made them an orc. No particular reason for this, I just kind of wanted to make an orc. Any race will work here. But, I mean, this guy, I was quite happy with how he turned out looks-wise. Unfortunately, it is modded, but, still looks good. But anyways, let's get into the build. I actually want to kick things off as a rogue. Rogue is going to give us a few things, namely these weapon proficiencies, which I do actually want, like armor proficiency, which we would get from Druid anyway, but it's something I want to pick up regardless. And just more ability skill proficiencies overall, which I think is quite nice. Now, let me go over the ability scores first. I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's been a while since I recorded the BG3 video, especially if you saw my last one. Anyways, so here we are. The ability scores are going to look a bit weird, but trust me, it will make sense. Dexterity at 15. Yes, having it at an odd number is weird, but we will be rounding that out in a moment. Constitution at 16. This is just going to give us a decent pool of HP outside of wild shape, because this build is going to be designed to work with and without wild shape. You'll see what I mean. Intelligence is at 8. We don't need it, although I think this guy absolutely would have intelligence otherwise. Wisdom at 16 is our main spellcasting stats, so that we want it. And Charisma is at 10, because again, I think this guy is a little bit charismatic. I mean, look at that face. He's got the fancy moustache and everything. As for our skill proficiencies, I've gone with whatever I felt like in the moment. The game has kind of gone for stealth and expertise in that as well. Sleight of hand actually comes from our background. I went with the I believe it's the criminal background, because I actually think this guy would be a bit of a deceiver and a swindler, because of course he probably wouldn't want people knowing about his necromantic practices, and I imagine kind of having that kind of panther Displacer Beast kind of vibe about him, he would be a bit stealthy, so I decided to go with that. And orcs also automatically come with intimidation as well, which is nice. So you can kind of mess around with any of your skills that you like here, it really doesn't matter. Now at level 2, it's entirely up to you what you want to do. You can kind of go straight into the druid stuff, or you can continue with the rogue stuff. It is completely up to you. I'll just show the levels kind of in order. We'll do the rogue levels first and then the druid levels next, but it's entirely up to you however you want to level this build. But with rogue level 2 we're going to get the ability to hide, dash and disengage as a bonus action. This is really actually going to help our maneuverability. Next up we get to choose our subclass, and of course we're going with Thief. For those of you that don't know, this works for both Wildshape and the Displacer Beast form, as well as the Slayer form, actually, from Dark Urge, if I remember correctly. Thief's second bonus action will carry over into those forms, meaning that specifically with the Displacer Beast Wildshape, we can now teleport twice per turn and do a bunch of other wacky stuff. But that's not all, since we can use other Wildshape forms as well, forms like the Spider, which can cast a web as a bonus action that sticks around and creates difficult terrain and makes it harder for your opponents to move. They can do that twice per turn, and those webs don't go away, so you can actually make a whole field of webs, and some other wild shapes have some unique interactions with this as well, such as the Owl Bear, where you can rage and then do your crushing flight jump to knock enemies prone and do some extra damage in the same round. So you're really going to have to experiment with the efficacy of having a second bonus action as a druid, but I think it's incredibly fun to experiment with, and again, for our main goal here, the Displacer Beast shape, this is going to work out really nicely, but it'll feel good with the progression of this build as well. Because again, you can, if you wanted to up until this point, you could be dual-wielding scimitars or short swords or something and being able to be a pretty decent martial fighter as a rogue and get some sneak attacks off in the early game, but again, you could go straight into those druid levels if you want. Next up at Rogue level 4, now you can choose to go for a 3-9 split, leaning into the 9 on the Druid, if you don't care about this extra feat. I do want 3 feats though, just because I think it's going to give this build a bit more versatility in how you're able to build it, so I'll be going for that here. But if you want those 9th level spell slots and that extra level for a feature that I'll be discussing in a minute, you can go for a 3-9 split if you like, but I think the 4-8 will work just fine. Speaking of feats, I'm going to get this weird kind of feat out of the way. Resilience. Now, I want Resilient Dexterity. That's going to round out our Dexterity in our base form, which is nice. However, for those of you that don't know, any of the resilient stat boosts that you choose will carry over into Wildshape and other forms. And because our Displacer Beast shape naturally has a 15 in Dexterity, for some reason, this will round that Dexterity out to a 16 as well while in the Displacer Beast form, giving us a bit more AC and better Dex saves. I mean, you might not think that's worth it, so feel free to shift these stats around, but I thought I would point out that interaction, as it does make the Displacer Beast form stronger, if only a little bit. Now that we're finished with our rogue levels, we are going to go into the main attraction here, Druid. Druid is going to give us a couple of things, namely a couple of cantrips, and Shillelagh and Thorn Whip are perfect for this build, so I'll be sticking with those. As for our spells, it's entirely up to you what you want to bring. I'm just going to bring the standard kind of affair. I want Enhanced Sleep, Longstrider, and Speak with Animals for all of that druidy goodness, and the ability to use Longstrider, which will carry over into our Wildshape forms, as well as Enhanced Sleep to be able to get around the map. But I'm also going to be picking up Healing Word, and now normally I don't really focus on the healing aspects of druids, but since we have 2 bonus actions, we can get off 2 heals per turn with this, so that can actually be quite beneficial in order to keep our health up when we're outside of Wildshape. Next up for our subclass, again, kind of leaning into that slightly corrupted side of things, and, you know, the kind of taboo areas of druidism, I guess. We're going with Circle of Spores. Circle of Spores is going to get us Symbiotic Entity, and you're probably thinking, why the hell are we not going Moon Druid? And this is why. Now, the Displacer Beast shape does not count as a wild shape, meaning that if we were to go for Moon Druid and subsequently the Armour of Moon Basking, which I would always include on a wild shape Druid build, if that goes with Moon, it wouldn't actually gain any of the benefits from going Moon Druid. Our wild shape forms would, yes, but our main thing that we're going for here wouldn't. Circle of Spores, however, has some interesting synergy. For some reason, the Symbiotic Entity buff that you get, that being the temporary HP, sticks around when you turn into a Displacer Beast. Essentially, at the end of this build, giving us 32 temporary hit points on top of the 85 the Displacer Beast normally gets. That's going to allow us to stick around in that form a lot longer. Now, you may have seen in the combat footage we were getting battered around quite a bit, and you'll see it a bit more at the end, so our wild shape didn't last as long as I would have liked, but again, if you're playing this build in a full party that's just my testing environment, like, you will absolutely be fine. This build will do a ton for you and your party, so feel free to, you know, experiment and give this a go, because Symbiotic Entity stacking with our Displacer Beast form is going to be really nice. Unfortunately, I don't believe the additional necrotic damage worked, but the temporary HP more than makes up for it. And again, it gives us a ton of versatility outside of using that wild shape as well, because we can do things like Halo with Spores and the like, so which will give us extra necrotic damage, and we'll be able to get more into that in just a second. We also get Bone Chill as a necrotic cantrip, which is nice. And we get an extra spell at this level. It's entirely up to you what you want to bring. It really doesn't matter. Good berry, because I want a snack. Next up at Druid level 3, we are going to get some extra spells. And again, this is kind of a pick your favourite situation. It really doesn't matter. For the sake of the length of this video, I'm just going to kind of get through these next levels, because they're not as important. As for our cantrips, you can pick another one here. I would say Guidance is pretty good. We also do get another spell at this level. Again, pick whatever you like. And then as for our feats, I am going to go over another thing here. Normally when I make wild shape builds, I pick up Tavern Brawler. Because Tavern Brawler, for those of you that don't know, works with wild shape, applying the strength modifier twice to the attack and damage rolls. Except when, for those of you who remember a few patches ago, that Tavern Brawler's interaction with wild shape was bugged. Only the attack roll bonus got applied. And they fixed that for wild shape, but not for Displacer Beast form. Taking Tavern Brawler with Displacer Beast still only gives you the attack roll benefit, whereas other wild shape forms also get the damage roll. So at the current moment in time, patch what's it called? Are we on patch 6? Yeah, patch 6. I don't think Tavern Brawler is worth it. In fact, it might not even be a bug, because Tentacle Whip might actually be classed as a like a weapon attack, not an unarmed strike, so it might even be intentional, but just in case it's not, keep an eye out for a future patch where that might get fixed. But for now, I can't recommend Tavern Brawler for this build if you're mainly focusing on the Displacer Beast. If you're focusing on the other wild shapes like the Owlbear, then yeah, pick it up. But not in this case. Some other feats that I do know work. Alert would be a really nice feat to be able to allow you to get your wild shape early if you get jumped in combat. I don't think Savage Attacker works because it's not a weapon attack. I don't know, there's a few things here. Lucky would work. You'll have to mess around with a few of them. But I'm going to go for an ability score improvement and bump up my Wisdom, just because, again, we are going to be a spellcaster as well with this build. We might as well have high Wisdom, though I could see some value in getting higher Dexterities for the better initiative rolls, or higher Constitution for a bit more HP. Again, feel free to play around with this one. At level 5, we do get access to level 3 spells and the ability Wild Strike, allowing us to make an additional unarmed strike while in wild shape. Unfortunately, this does not stack with any sort of Displacer Beast features. As I said, they get their own version of extra attacks, so, you know, phooey. But we still get the exact same amount of extra attacks at the end of the day, because they get attack and extra attack and improved extra attack. So they're making 3 attacks per turn regardless, so it doesn't really matter. As for our spells, again, we get access to level 3 ones at this point. Again, it's kind of a choose whatever you like situation. It really doesn't matter. At level 6, we get access to Panther and Owlbear transformations, as well as Fungal Infestation, allowing us to use our Fungal Infestation charges, plus our reaction, to raise some undead corpses filled with spores. And those zombies that we raise can go on to infect other people and create even more zombies for us, giving us a little army as we take down foes. Very, very nice. And yeah, again, spells. I'm just skipping over them today. At level 7, we do get access to level 4 spells, including Blight and Confusion, which is nice, but we also do get to pick up summoning spells, which I think would be really nice for bolstering the playstyle here, giving us a few more summons to add to our party, and again, the rest can be whatever you like. And finally, at level 8, we do get to pick up another feat, and again, feel free to experiment, find stuff that works for you. I'm just going to go with another ability score improvement to max out my Wisdom. You may feel like if you're focusing more on the summoning spells that you don't really care as much about bumping up your Wisdom, as you're just going to be summoning things anyway, so you might get more value out of bumping up something else, but I like having a maxed out main stat on my builds, so this is what I'm going for, but again, feel free to experiment. Let me know what you would do in the comments. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a ton of tankiness. Between your Displacer Beast form and your Wild Shape, you're going to be able to stay in the battle for very, very long amounts of time, as well as being able to use Symbiotic Entity to give yourself a ton of temporary HP on extra damage on top of that, as well as being able to use your 2 bonus actions to basically augment your abilities and be able to get off a ton of teleports and such like that with the Displacer Beast, or experiment with other abilities as well. But yeah, I feel like overall this build is quite a lot of fun. You're going to be able to really get the most out of your kind of transformation there and really figure out what makes this build unique. Yes, unfortunately, you aren't going to be getting it into level 3, which sucks, which is why I've kind of gone with this Druid route. But really, if you're focusing on the Displacer Beast shaping, you find you're not using the other wild shape forms too much, and Symbiotic Entity isn't really doing it for you for whatever reason, feel free to just drop the Druid levels entirely and make something else, keeping those 2 bonus action levels, 2 bonus actions from 3 rogue levels, and do the whatever you like with the rest. But for now, let's get into the equipment. Let's move the camera over slightly. Yeah, there we go. So let's just get this out of the way real quick. The standard Druid kit that I've kind of gone for here, the Shapeshifter hat and the Armour of Moonbasking. Now, I know I said the Armour of Moonbasking does not work with Displacer Beast, and that is still correct. However, since we want to kind of be able to use other wild shapes as well, this armor does a little bit more for us than the Circle of the Land and Spores variants, just giving us that temporary hit point boost while in wild shape, reducing incoming damage, giving us a +2 bonus to our armor class and advantage on saving throws against spells. It just made a bit more sense to go with this armor. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the highest AC in the world out of wild shape. In fact, it's pretty friggin' abysmal. But again, since we're mainly focusing on using other transformations and such, it's not as bad. So yeah, definitely want the Shapeshifter hat for that extra wild shape charge, which for us also means an extra Symbiotic Entity, which we really, really want. So that's 3 per short rest. It's 2 per short rest, but this isn't 1 per additional long rest. So, you know, if you really need that extra wild shape, it does make sense. As for our gloves, I've gone with the Abyss Beckoners. Again, we're kind of this almost like mixture of a druid and sort of a mad scientist type character, I guess. So get it, and since we have summons, including some powerful undead summons, which I'll get to in a minute, this will allow all of our summons to have resistance to all damage except psychic. However, they must succeed a wisdom saving throw every turn or be driven mad, and madness basically means that they will attack the nearest creature. So basically, if you can kind of mitigate this if you know what to do, because this is a toggleable passive that you can toggle on and off. So you can kind of cheese the negative effects of this, and you mainly get the kind of resistances here to keep all of your summons alive a while longer. So that's your Mephits, that's your Woodland Beings, your Create Undead, which you're going to be getting from the Crypt Lord ring, allowing you to summon a very powerful undead zombie, your Fungal Infections, your regular Animate Dead, because you get that as well. You're going to have a ton of options there. And finally, the boots are the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, basically meaning that you cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip with grease or ice. And Misty Step is going to it can be used once per short rest to kind of let you move around the battlefield. If you decide to go with things like the spider strategy and spew webs everywhere, then this is going to help you if you get knocked out of your wild shape, because that wild shape does have pretty low HP. But I kind of just wanted these because they're a decent Act 1 option and they'll work really nicely for you. And the Abyss Beckoners are actually Act 1 as well, which is nice. Unfortunately, the hat and the armor are Act 3, so I've got some earlier game alternatives here. The Circle of Bones allows you to cast Animate Dead once per long rest. So if you don't have the appropriate levels yet to get that from our class, you can get it a little bit earlier. And it also makes all allied undead within 6 meters resistant to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. So, you know, if you want to just use undead and you don't want to really have them be going mad at you, then you can get a slightly lesser version of the protection that the Abyss Beckoners will give you. And also we have the Sharpened Snare Cuirass as a medium armor option to pick up in Act 2. Basically making it so enemies have disadvantage on saving throws against your attacks and spells that inflict restraint. Don't really have anything like that. We're mainly just here for a kind of like look that's still a bit naturey, but also gives us a decent bump to our armor class. And for the record, here is what the other armor looks like by default as well. But I'm using camp clothing, which is modded from the the extra gear as camp clothing mod, as well as using the muted black plus summer green dye from the boring dye pack. That's kind of how I'm achieving this look here. As for our weapons, I have a few options for you here. The first one that's kind of mandatory for this build is the Darkfire Shortbow. This is going to give us resistance to fire and cold damage and the ability to cast haste on ourselves once per long rest. Getting 2 bonus actions plus haste on the Displacer Beast shape is freaking nuts. It's 6 attacks per turn with armor action, and then being able to teleport twice as a bonus action. It is absolutely insane. You will create clones everywhere. You will be attacking left, right, and center. It's awesome. So have this on your build for sure. But we also have here, I had to include this in the build, this is the Pale Oak. This is basically the kind of like Shadow Druid staff that you can pick up in Act 1 for doing a questline. Basically it means that Druidic Vines cannot ensnare you, and you also get the ability to use Faith Warden's Vines, allowing you to basically cast a special version of Entangled. I just had to include it here for the flavor if you wanted to pick up a Druidic kind of staff and didn't care about what weapon you used, but we went rogue at the start for a reason. In Act 1 you could pick up the Knife of the Undermountain King, just giving you a buff to your critical hit attacks and giving you a decent melee option for when you're outside of your wild shape. I felt like it worked pretty well for this build. I mean, it does a bunch of other stuff like rerolling 1s and 2s and having advantage on lightly or heavily obscured creatures. It's just an overall decent sidearm for when you need it. Unfortunately, that critical hit bonus does not carry over into our wild shape or other transformations, so we can't do a Displacer Beast crit stacking build, because I absolutely would. However, what does work for us is the Duelist's Prerogative, obtained in Act 3. This weapon is going to come with a bunch of stuff that is going to augment our build quite a bit. It's got kind of a necrotic damage theme, which works for us. It's a +3 legendary weapon. While our offhand is empty, we score critical hits when rolling a 19. Moreover, we gain an additional reaction, and I've tested this. That additional reaction carries over into the Displacer Beast shape, so that means we get those tentacle attack reactions twice per turn, which is awesome. Also, whenever we hit with this melee weapon, we can use a reaction to deal necrotic damage equal to our proficiency bonus, which is nice. But this build also comes with a free bonus action attack as well, called Duel's Enthusiasm, as well as Challenge to a Duel. We can use both of these in a single turn thanks to the fact that we have 2 bonus actions, so that means we can make enemies bleed, as well as deal basically an attack, and we basically get extra attack at the use of our bonus action, which is great. This would definitely be the weapon I recommend. It augments all aspects of the build quite nicely. And finally, the accessories. I already touched on the Cryptlord Ring, and the other 2 are mainly just for flavour, so feel free to swap these out. We have the Spectator's Eyes, giving us Ray of Fear and Wounding Ray, basically just ways to inflict frighten and necrotic damage at range. I mean, it's fun. It's kind of based on like a Spectator, which again, if this guy accepts all aspects of nature as being natural, then the Spectator is part of that, so I feel like him having abilities related to that makes sense. And finally, the Ring of Exalted Marrow, allowing you to use Extort the Risen, which is basically the command spell, but it's used on undead, and Ghoulish Touch, which can paralyze a target and deal a bit of necrotic damage. Basically just 2 very thematic items for this build, but if you wanted to swap these out, you absolutely can. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, like I said, you're just going to be getting a very tanky build out of this. The temporary HP from Symbiotic Energy, plus tacked on with the Wild Shape and Displacer Beast forms, basically giving you near infinite HP. Not as much as a Wild Shape Druid, a Moon Druid who can, use Lunar Mend, but the utility that comes with having that second bonus action and all the stuff that's going to allow you, kind of allow you to do both in and out of your Displacer Beast form, is going to feel really nice. Basically, this guy is as much of a fighter outside of his Displacer Beast form as he is while in it. Again, you'll be seeing the combat footage now, and we do get passed around a bit. A lot of our summons get instantly destroyed and such like that, but that is kind of just the nature of fighting Steel Watchers. And for the record, the Steel Watcher in this encounter has like more than double the HP of the Steel Watcher that you encounter in the usual fight I test outside on the bridge. So yeah, that was fun. And I'll be honest, this fight was a struggle. It was a lot of a back and forth between myself and the Steel Watcher, mainly the other people who got added in, especially the 2 extras that jumped in right at the very end of the combat footage, did give me a bit of trouble, but in the end this build did prevail, and I'm all the happier for it. But yeah, I mean, this build definitely works better as part of a team, because again, being able to spread the damage out over your party rather than have them all attack you is going to allow you to keep your forms up a bit longer. Again, my testing environment, it's tricky because obviously I want to test builds on their own to make sure they're good enough, but obviously it doesn't really reflect how you're going to be playing this build, because again, you will be playing this build with party members, which again will improve the performance of all of my builds, so you kind of have to take any combat footage you see with a grain of salt. Yes, sometimes it looks like my builds underperform, but again, if they're part of a party, it's going to change things up, trust me. But it doesn't matter, this build is still really strong. I mean, we're doing pretty decent damage across the board, and again, we were able to take down all of our foes in the end, no problem. Again, this is all tested on Tactician, so I feel like this build is a success. It's a very fun, thematic build with a lot of interesting mechanical utility, and once again, thank you to Faye and Frost for helping me make this. On to end of video stuff, kind of channel updates or whatever. Thank you all for watching the April Fool's video. I will formally apologize, obviously, for deceiving people, but I kind of got that, like, I was going to do something different. I was going to make a modded build with a subclass that was just, with like a class mod that was just completely out there, but like pretend it was really lore friendly and like that it was a secret unlock in the game, and just do something really cringeworthy. But then I'm not even kidding, but night before April Fool's, because I hadn't even recorded anything yet, I was like, wait, what if I do this and like make an Elden Ring build based on like a build from Baldur's Gate? And then I just had to do it. So what ended up happening was I ended up very quickly reskinning, quickly changing the hair color of one of my already existing characters and going from there. And honestly, it was really, really fun. Coming up with the build, getting to work with, the Soulsborne series of games, which is what I used to do before I even made YouTube videos. And like, it was so fun coming up with like, oh, this armor could work really nicely, and like these spells that never actually get used would make total sense within context. I got to, test it on old Margit for old time's sake. And honestly, I really want to take a crack at Elden Ring again. Actually on the channel this time. I want to make some Elden Ring builds. I want to kind of experiment with the idea of making builds based on either the cast of Baldur's Gate 3 or classes and subclasses from Dungeons & Dragons and Baldur's Gate themselves, because I mean, I can already see how I would do an Astarion build. I can think of a really unique interaction with some items and some Ashes of War that could make even his unique kind of abilities come out in the build, like a little dual-wielding short sword build and such like that, with the ability to do like bites and like crits and such. It could be so fun. I could see Karlach just being a really fun like Berserker Rage build. Gale with like his sorceries. Like, honestly, I really, really want to take a crack at that. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think, you know what? I'm going to commit to it now. From Wednesdays onward, I'm going to start a new build series for Elden Ring. I'm going to start by building the cast of Baldur's Gate 3 in Elden Ring. I will redo the Shadowheart build because I kind of went into that half-cocked, so I'll redo her again with probably a bit more of an actual cleric focus at the end, rather than trying to make trickery work with the poison and all that, and see how we go from there. I think it would be really, really interesting to give it a shot, and then after that, move on to just more broader concepts like D&D classes, or just whatever I feel like. I really want to take a crack at Elden Ring, and I know it's very, very different than what my audience has come to expect, but I really want to try something new and perhaps even find some other audiences as well, not just be relying on Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, if I'm being honest, Baldur's Gate 3 has kind of outlived its popularity somewhat online in the wider space, and I feel like if I want to kind of keep the channel up, I gotta change tactics a bit, so I'm gonna try some Elden Ring stuff. It's not gonna go well at the start, I know that for a fact. I'm gonna make mistakes, and it's not gonna be that appealing to a lot of people, but I'm hoping it will start to find a new audience as we go. So that's kind of my plan. I think I'm gonna try some Elden Ring stuff, just to change things up for my own sanity's sake. But yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully enough of the combat footage is played. The combat footage this time was really, really long. If so, I will kind of leave it playing in the background now as I sign off. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.
Immunity.